Hello, my name is Matthew, and this morning I read The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, and I'm not sure how much I've talked about Oscar Wilde on this channel. Before I get to the book, my encounter with Oscar Wilde was instrumental in my reading life. I started reading late, my late teens, early 20s. I'd met my old friend Bob, who I talked about on this channel, who had recommended books to me. Things like Charles Dickens and Thomas Hardy and Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, Thomas Mann, all sorts of books, including Oscar Wilde. And Oscar Wilde was the keyhole. He was the skeleton key for me as a young reader, someone that didn't really read very much, and learning that reading is fun, really fun. And I reading the portrait, the picture of Dorian Gray, my late teens, early 20s, like I can't quite remember, was like a world opening up. What you get with Oscar Wilde is that personality. And as I've read the plays and letters and I read a biography by Richard Ellman, the more kind of social, philosophical work or essays like the Decay of Lying or the other essays that he has, learning more and more about Oscar Wilde and learning about his personality. One of the faults or detractions that might come up is the repetition. So he sort of has an arsenal of quips, witticisms, epigrams, aphorisms that you'll find kind of repeat through different stories. I just see Oscar Wilde as this big, larger than life personality, this table talk that even though it repeats, I want to hear it again. I'm not going to get into Oscar Wilde's personal life because one, it's tragic and I don't care to talk about it, and also when I talk about the picture of Dorian Gray, I want to talk about it as a standalone novel. I have this. It's the Major Works by Oscar Wilde, and it's a well-loved book that I've spent so much time with. It has Lord Arthur Saville's Crime and The Happy Prince and The Devoted Friend and The Picture in Grey, The Decay of Lying, The Critique as an Artist, Salome, Lady Wendermeier's Fan, An Ideal Husband, The Importance of Being Earnest, The Ballad of Reading Jail. It doesn't have the Profundus, but this was an author that took me through The Looking Glass, and at every turn I found brilliant. I spent a couple years reading his novel, reading the plays, and the short stories, and the poem, and the essays, and for every form and medium, it was just brilliant and deep and light and funny and serious and paradoxical and truthful, and a distillation of all of the high points that you can find in Oscar Wilde. I really feel like a very good first point of reference or a stepping stone is the portrait of Dorian Gray. Although I feel like now I feel like an old man because I think it's probably been maybe 15 years since I've read this cover to cover. Um, I read it actually because I was looking for a warm blanket. uh, I've had an amazing reading run over the past weeks and months of just great book after great book, and I had been at a little bit of a loss. I'm still reading, but finding a next book, and I thought, man, I love Oscar Wilde. Let me pick up the picture of Dorian Gray, and so I read it this morning, um, and it does have flaws. It's not the perfect novel that I remember when I was younger, but it does have perfect moments. The first 30, 50 pages where we get the setup. So we have Basil, the artist. We have Lord Henry Wotton, the decadent, and in a lot of ways the mouthpiece of Oscar Wilde's table talk. Although basically every character is a mouthpiece for Oscar Wilde. They are impossible characters and impossible dialogues. It's all Oscar Wilde talking all the time, full tilt, uh, commanding the table, keeping everybody entertained. But the person that's cranked up to 11 and the person that levels the table every time is Lord Henry Wotton. And the situation is Basil was a painter, a well regarded, notable artist, having, in the beginning, having a conversation with his friend Lord Henry Wotton. Basil, we're told, is the one person that Wotton couldn't corrupt. And he had met a young, beautiful man that had become a muse, an inspiration for his whole worldview on aesthetics and art, and also a model. Wotton is curious, Basil is concealing, and he lets it slip that it's Dorian Gray. And there's an unexpected meeting. Dorian Gray comes in, and even though Wotton tries to respect Basil's wishes, that they don't interact, he tells Basil tells Wotton, I don't want you, with your corrupting mind and all of your paradoxical, wild ideas, I don't want you corrupting this young man. And Wotton tries to leave, and just through a few witticisms and epigrams, Wotton charms him. And when Wotton goes to leave, Dorian Gray says, "No, I don't want you to leave." And Basil consents. And there, at the beginning of the book, there is just this crushing, brilliant, fantastical dialogue between Dorian Gray and Wotton, where Wotton is having this conversation, and Basil, meanwhile, is in the other room painting a beautiful picture of a beautiful man, and Lord Henry Wotton is saying, "No, like the the true genius is youth. The most important thing in the world is youth and being beautiful, and you're beautiful, and you're gonna lose it. And there's gonna be a day that you turn around and you're gonna be wrinkled and craggled and frail. And then Basil basically says, like, well, the painting is done. And he comes in and he's irritated, looking at the painting, going, now that I've learned all of these corrupting, immoral, dark thoughts from Wooten, I'm looking at my embarrassment. Here is a painting that will always be younger than me. When I look at this painting tomorrow, I'm going to be 1 day older, and 5 years from now, I'll be 5 days older. And every time I look at this painting, and he wishes and says, I wish I could just stay as beautiful as this painting. And that the painting would keep my soul, my sins, and my digressions and discretions, and all the terrible things that I do, all the things that put lines on my face. I wish that would go into the painting, and that I could stay beautiful. And that wish comes true. The middle portion of the book, I feel like I still feel like it's genius. I mean, I feel like everything by Oscar Wilde is just brilliant, but for as good as it is, it doesn't hold up to the heights of the beginning of the book or the heights of the end of the book. We have Dorian Gray falling in love. We have Sybil Lane, I think, who's just a slight of a character. It's an actress who throws herself into Shakespearean roles, and she falls in love with Dorian Gray, and then no longer has the need to put so much of herself into the role that she's playing, and as a result, she's no longer as good of an actress, and this consequence leads to a really tragic moment. It's hard to read, and it's uncomfortable. Dorian Gray, up to this point, has been a fairly kind of empty-headed, well-meaning, aristocratic character who comes off poorly. There is a reason why he would. There's a consequence to him being so unlikable, and that the painting, when he gets home, has changed slightly. He was going to marry this woman, and she had one bad performance in front of his friends, Basil and Wooten. And in an angry response, just terrorizes her with rebuke and anger and distance, and calls off everything and says, you will never see me again. I will never speak your name again. It's brutal. And he gets home and he looks at the painting, and he sees a slight change. There's a scowl in the portrait that wasn't there before. And he's delirious, and he goes to bed and wakes up, and it's still there, and he's now hiding the painting. Decides that he overreacted, and that he will go to Sybil and be contrite and try to make amends or whatever, only to find out that she killed herself. And there's an active investigation as to what exactly happened. I didn't mention, but there's a family dispute with the family, which is kind of a weaker part of the book, but does have a payoff later on. Sybil has a brother that knows Dorian Gray only by the name Prince Charming, which we'll maybe hopefully get to later. And at this point, there's one moment a little bit later on, but we now have Dorian Gray just being corrupted. We have Wooten's influence, and he gives him a book. It's one of my favorite personal stories. He gives him a book that corrupts him, and we just see this downward spiral. Now Dorian understands sins and immorality and all these things that they are actually going into the painting. And he is physically beautiful. Wooten mentions it, Basil mentions it. There's scandal that starts percolating through society of his transgressions and just nighttime activities of Dorian Gray, this kind of salacious figure. And much like the paradoxical conversation that we hear from predominantly Wooten, but it really is a through line with all of the characters. We have that unexpected turn. So the thing that you're not expecting is it's very conversational, and the plot has the same kind of twist. It kind of reminds me of Maupassant stories where it doesn't end the way that you were quite expecting, which leaves you satisfied. And in this story, where eventually there's a murder, Dorian Gray murders someone, and I'll maybe not say who to not entirely spoil the book, and gets away with it. He kind of unintentionally was a party of someone committing suicide, and as a result of the supernatural elements of the book and his ability to keep his youthful appearance, 20 years after the fact, when someone confronts him to kill him, he's able to get away with it. So there's like kind of things that like turn themselves on their heads that can feel decadent and immoral and dirty in a way that feels really good. And I feel like it has one of the best endings for this kind of story. I love the last paragraph. I can't objectively say that it's just like one amazing book. If I was 20 and I read this book and had the ability to talk on camera, I absolutely would, because I was enamored, and the entertainment value is just through the roof. If you buy into Oscar Wilde's particular brand of humor. And I really want to punctuate, if you're watching this far, thank you, how influential Oscar Wilde was for my reading life. So reading this book and talking to Bob and going, oh my gosh, this amazing book. And Bob saying, well, you know the book that Lord Henry Wooten gave Dorian Gray that corrupts him, that yellow-covered book, was a real book, and it turns out that it's Against Nature by Housman, or however you say it. Bob had a copy that he hands me. I read it in a day. But the references to Shakespeare and many French writers, and the Satyricon, which I actually prepared. I have the Satyricon by Petronius, which this copy, the translation, is ascribed to Oscar Wilde, so maybe it's apocryphal, but this might be the Satyricon translated by Oscar Wilde. And just in general, there are rabbit holes that are specific, but the main point is being young and dumb and ignorant and willing and curious, and just finding those first um, stepping stones for things that are fun and interesting and new and exhilarating and dangerous. Oscar Wilde put me on a path of, he lined these walls. When I go on about Dostoevsky or Flaubert or whatever, more kind of serious, difficult books, getting there for me really was through Oscar Wilde, and laughing all the way and crying all the way. So I'm happy that I've finally went back and talked to my old friend Oscar Wilde, and read The Picture of Dorian Gray. So let me know if you've read it. Oscar Wilde, if I haven't made it clear, is just one of my oldest friends. So thank you for watching. Please leave a comment if you would like, and thank you, and take care.